Welcome to the Thinking Legal podcast with me, David Kerner. This is a podcast about the human and psychological aspects of the legal sector. I run The Marketing Legal, a legal marketing agency, and you can find us at www.themarketinglegal.com. I hope you enjoy the show. So today I am joined by Nigel Haddon, who runs Haddon Consult. And before that, he spent 30 years in private practice. And he's also a former chair of the law management section of the Law Society. He's also a teaching fellow in pricing on the Master of Legal Business course at the College of Law Australia. Nice of you to join me, Nigel.
Thank you, David.
So Nigel, you've had a pretty kind of interesting career. I think a good place to start is to kind of hear your journey into what you do now and why you've decided to focus on value pricing.
I'll give you the sort of middle-sized version, David, so as not to turn all your listeners off with the long version. But yes, I've been in the legal sector now for 40 years, and I think in that time it'd be fair to say I've had 5 distinctly different careers. I started off as a sort of high street jack of all trades, doing a bit of everything. Became a family law specialist. During that period, rather oddly for a family law specialist, I looked after a national house builder and did a lot of their litigation and some of their planning and environmental work. So although I like to tell it that, after 20 years as a family lawyer, I suddenly became a construction lawyer, it wasn't quite as dramatic as I often make out. But I did stop practicing family law after 20 or so years, became a construction lawyer. Effectively, it was a culmination of a long transition, I suppose. Then I heeded the siren calls of management and became, after being a couple of years as head of a dispute resolution team in the firm I was with at the time, then became that firm's managing partner, led that firm through a number of mergers to build a reasonable size top 200 law firm in the northwest of England. So I had my last 8 or 9 years in private practice was as a managing partner and CEO. Towards the end of that, about a year or so before I left private practice, we worked as a firm with a pricing consultant, a very well-known pricing consultant by the name of Richard Bircher. I'd never heard of pricing consultants till we worked with Richard. But his impact, the impact of his work with us on the firm was profound, and it had quite a profound impact on me. And as I was growing stale towards the end of my term as managing partner, when I did eventually leave the firm a year or so later, it was clear to me that pricing was one of the avenues I was keen to explore. I spent a little bit of time in discussions with Richard Bircher and his business partner, Martin Jennings. And for about 7 years, I worked very happily with Bircher Jennings in pricing before about 3 years ago, going completely under my own steam and own brand. So why pricing? Well, I hadn't seen anything have as great an impact on the fortunes of a law firm as that. And as any managing partner will tell you, you try every lever there is. You pull this to get 0.5% marginal gain there. You cut costs here in the middle of a recession. You've got costs there. But pricing can have a transformative impact, not just on the finances of a law firm, but also on its relationships with clients. And that's maybe something you'll want to explore as we go on through that conversation. So pricing's not the only thing I do, David, but it is by far the greater percentage of my time. And as you say, I don't just train lawyers and accountants in pricing. I'm now teaching pricing at master's level in Australia.
Excellent. Sounds like a really kind of interesting kind of career path. So I think in terms of value pricing, I think it might be good to take a step back and maybe you could explain the principles behind it, and as you said, kind of it's not something that lawyers necessarily are aware of, although it has a profound effect on their businesses.
It's an area that lawyers don't take to readily. Let's be honest about it. We usually, when I'm working with law firms, I'm happy to guide them through the first few baby steps on the value pricing journey. When I work with accountants, they go in leaps and bounds. And to give you an example of what value pricing is and how it might mean different things, if you're working with accountants who might be tax consultants, for example, they will think straight away about, if I can save this client X £100,000 in tax, well, surely they're going to be happy to pay me 10% of that. They're not thinking, how long will it take me to formulate the advice and the strategy, the implementation of which leads to the tax saving. You put the same proposition to a tax lawyer working in a law firm, and immediately it's, yeah, but how many hours will it take me to do? No. Value pricing is about looking to price a service through the eyes of a client. What value is being delivered to the client? And although there are clients that are who are regular users of law firms and used to buying their legal services by the hour, for most, it's a really crazy way of pricing. And it certainly gets in the way of value. The metaphor I often use is clients really don't give a damn how long it takes us to push the rock to the top of the hill. They're only interested in, can we get the rock to the top of the hill? In other words, it's results, it's outcomes, it's reassurance, it's peace of mind, it's letting them know that they're not in breach of this or that regulation. These are the things that clients value, not hours.
Right. Yes, and that's an ongoing debate that we'll probably touch on throughout this interview. And as this podcast is about the kind of human and psychological aspects of the legal sector, I think in our discussions before, you kind of spoke about the behavioural economics side of value pricing. So perhaps you could talk a bit about the psychological underpinnings of this area.
I think we have to start by looking at what the ills are that some psychological principles can help us address. So, for most clients working with law firms, even for sophisticated clients, the complaints are usually around lack of transparency, a feeling of not being able to control what's going on, at least in terms of pricing and billing, even not being able to influence how much time a lawyer will spend and therefore what they'll ultimately have to pay for, and a lack of certainty. Now, all of these things they've been constants for so long as lawyers have been selling time in 6-minute units. So those are the ills, and they're the things that clients complain about in survey after survey in terms of their relationships with their law firms. So how do we address them? Well, by giving choice in the first place. That's the fundamental principle. And of course, giving clients a choice between, I can price it for you this way at this price, I can price it for you in a different way at this price, I can price it for you in a yet third way at this price, which would you prefer, is a much healthier conversation on both sides of the desk than I'm £700 an hour, which leaves a client just rocking in their chair and wondering just how bad this is going to get. How many lots of £700 am I going to have to pick up? So the move from this is my price to how would you like us to price it for you, and these are the options you've got, at the very least gives clients a sense that they are in control. If it's not complete control, then it's at the very least collaboration rather than the lawyer determining how things will progress. And the other issue that I mentioned as an ill that can be resolved quite easily is lawyers can give a fixed fee for anything they do. And a lot of the work I do in training lawyers and accountants is about providing clients with certainty, because it's so highly valued by so many clients. And of course, in terms of providing certainty, it's about clarity. What are you going to get for this fixed fee? So we do a lot of work on that. So those are the ills, and those are the sort of principal psychological tools that are in play.
And in terms of those themes, so you also mentioned that not only can kind of good value pricing attract clients, it's also an element of satisfaction and retention. From a retention point of view, how do the strategies you work with encourage that?
So partly it's about encouraging lawyers to articulate their value proposition in a better and more meaningful way than they do at the moment, which is about providing service, providing quality of service, and providing a responsive service. So I tend to work with lawyers and get them to develop something along these lines, which will be, dear Mr. Prospective Client, law's no different to any other sector. There are law firms that are much more expensive than us, and there are law firms that are cheaper than us. Here at Value Pricing LLP, we like to think we give our clients a great service and provide them with better value than most. But if you're looking for cheap, that's not us. So establishing your base position and not worrying too much about the competition is part of it. Providing clients with choice around pricing is the single greatest tool in the pricing toolkit. And we've covered to a degree already how that works. But I always think, bring it back to something that people will experience in their day-to-day lives. So you might have a 6, 7, 8-year-old boy at home. It's bedtime and we want to get Oliver off to bed, but Oliver's not in the mood. And the conversation can get quite harrowing as Oliver tells us he's not tired, he's not going to bed, and you can't make him. But if, on the other hand, we spin it round and ask Oliver half an hour before bedtime, which gym jams are we going to wear tonight? Are we wearing the Marvel gym jams or the football kit? Then Oliver feels he's in control. He's making the decisions here, and he's cooperating. And then we can have a similar conversation with him about which toothbrush we're going to use and so on. So choice is genuinely an astonishingly powerful weapon in the pricing toolkit. Moving on from that, of course, and you'll be familiar with this given your background in psychology, once clients have invested in a choice, you then have what's known as the deal effect, don't you? That they think, I've got this great deal from this law firm. This law firm's given me a fixed fee in a piece of litigation. Nobody else would. So the deal effect takes hold, and that really does help with retention of that client and the deepening of the lawyer-client relationship.
Absolutely, yes. And I think kind of we've spoken about kind of how the kind of client-lawyer relationship. I think another kind of interesting factor in this is how law firms that tend to be kind of wedded to certain ways of doing things. How have you managed to influence change within law firms? Because obviously what you're proposing is a bit different from how things are usually done.
You're absolutely right. So the first thing is to recognise that the training I provide is a change management program.
Yeah.
It's not the entirety of it. In fact, it typically kick-starts the change management program that the firm's leaders and managers have to pick up following the training and address the implementation in a number of ways, through policies, through strategies, through changes in processes and systems, through internal communications and so on. But it is very much initiating a change management program. And that's typically why The training that I usually go into a firm to provide, it starts with a 2-day program. And most of the lawyers I talk to at first scratch their heads and say, 2 whole days? Really? What on earth do you find to talk about? But actually, we're just moving people's headspace. And although there's no question, all of the key skills that I work on with lawyers could be taught in a day. I don't think it would be. It's as effective as a change management piece. So letting people, finish around 2:30, 3 o'clock on day one, reflect, process, absorb, address some of their fears and concerns, and bring a slightly different perspective to day two. It tends to work 9 times out of 10. But moving on from that, of course, as I say, it's just the beginning of an implementation piece and a change management piece. What law firms then have to do is make their processes and systems as easy to use as possible for lawyers. Otherwise, you're going to come into the area of lawyer resistance to change, to trying new things, and I think you might want to talk to me about that in a moment.
Yes, yeah. Well, exactly. I mean that I think resistance to change. Lawyers tend to be quite a skeptical group. So how do you kind of tend to overcome that, and how do you get buy-in from the lawyers?
So my training begins with building up their confidence in pricing and in value. So it would be, I think, completely inappropriate to start with the negatives. You guys don't know what you're doing. You shouldn't be using hourly rates, etc. So I don't do that. Let's work on confidence. Let's work on articulating the value proposition. Let's look at choice. Let's look at some of the underlying economics, the behavioural economics that go into this. Let's go through some of the psychology of it, and then I lead them gently into the sunlit uplands and show them how this could work if you applied value pricing principles. Leaving any false modesty to one side, at the end of day two, in 49 cases out of 50, I tend to leave behind a room full of lawyers who are extremely motivated and enthused about trying their new value pricing principles. That doesn't mean it's going to be plain sailing from then. There's the habits of a lifetime to overcome. Some firms' processes and systems can be rather clunky to use for lawyers, and it can be quite difficult to suddenly start giving clients 3 pricing options rather than just switching on the meter and recording time. And of course, lawyers are very, very busy at the moment. Most law firms have capacity issues at the moment. They're struggling to recruit, struggling to retain talent, and that means most lawyers are overworked. Well, if you're going to be using value pricing, you've got to spend time thinking about your pricing and preparing pricing proposals. If you're just going to sell 6-minute units of time, you can just switch the meter on and get on with the file. So those are the principal obstacles that I think are typically addressed. Lawyers being too busy to put into practice what they'd like to put into practice, what they've been trained in, and in some firms, processes and systems being clunky, such that pricing ends up just being more grit in the shoe, I guess, rather than something that they are comfortable using and find easy to use.
Sure. And I guess you consult for firms in a number of jurisdictions. Are the kind of issues you have along those lines, are they similar across jurisdictions?
They are, as they are across different professional service firms, David. I mean, as you work in different jurisdictions, there are different legal frameworks, different regulatory frameworks. For example, on our doorstep in Northern Ireland, you can't have any contingency fees, any conditional fees, and yet that can be one of the main building blocks of value pricing. If we get this result for you, for example, we get this reward. And if we fail to get that result for you, we'll share some of the pain with you. That can be a really nice way into value pricing, but we simply can't do it in Northern Ireland. And in Germany, for example, the state regulates the fees for wills, which is not something you'd probably guess looking at it from outside. So there are all sorts of small details here and there, but principally the issues are the same.
So I think another kind of topic we can discuss is kind of specific examples where you've managed to kind of transform a firm's kind of performance and client relationships through value pricing principles.
Thanks, David. I mean, I'm not going to start by saying I transformed. It's a huge team effort, but giving them the tools to kickstart this change management program we were talking about. So one of my client firms, and I won't use the name on the podcast, but the story of this, the case study that I've got in mind, is on my website, so people can have a look there if they want more details. So a firm I worked with very extensively over a year-long period. So I trained all of their lawyers in value pricing within a 12-month period. And sitting down with their chief exec and their practice director, we looked at how might you measure success over the next 12 months. So the firm fully implemented the training they'd had. So all of their clients from then on got 2 or 3 pricing options. We've talked already about the importance of giving clients choice, the importance of giving clients fixed fees. So in this 12-month period, when they're giving clients choice, they're giving clients fixed fees, it went down an absolute storm with clients. They saw a 26% increase in average revenue per matter over that 12 months. And they also had 10% fewer matters. So what they created with, my help at the outset, but what they created was what they called a virtuous circle, with all of their lawyers working a little less hard for clients who valued what they did and were prepared to pay for it. The lawyers who were working a little less hard were able to give an even better level of service to each of their clients, which resulted in their clients talking to their friends and relatives about what a great service they're getting, which filled the pipeline and kept this circle going.
So I think looking into kind of the issues that might come up in the future, one of the big issues in this area, and we go back to the big debate that's been going on for years, is how kind of AI tools or automation tools might affect the industry, and there are obviously wide-ranging kind of implications kind of across issues. How might these new ways of working affect pricing?
That is one big question, David. And let's put the question in context. The death of the billable hour has been predicted for over 20 years. It's showing no sign yet of giving up. And indeed, there are structures in the legal system in this country that will make the dismantling of the billable hour somewhere between difficult and impossible. And I'm thinking, for example, of the cost budgeting regime in litigation in this country, which involves you notifying the court of how much time you expect to spend on various activities in various phases. So there are structural factors in play which militate against the abandonment of the billable hour, and yet AI presents the greatest challenge yet to the hegemony of the billable hour, in my opinion. And why do I say that? Well, we're already seeing AI being used to carry out document review in a legal context, and I dare say there are firms operating at a level that I'm not seeing that are using it in really quite imaginative and inventive ways. All of these save time. And if at the moment a law firm might charge a client for 20 hours of an associate's time to carry out some document review, what if that's done in 2 minutes by a piece of software? Then 20 hours of whatever pounds per hour of revenue has been lost. How do you charge for that? Well, what you don't do is say, let's call that 20 hours of associates' time, because that's fraud. But we have to find another way. So, like it or not, this technology, which, by the way, none of us knew about 2 years ago. We might have heard rumours in the wind, but we've all now played with it. We all now have some familiarity with it. It is going to have an impact on the way law firms carry out their business. And once they're starting to use it, it must have an impact on pricing. It simply must have. Where it'll go, David, I don't have my crystal ball with me. But I think they're going to have to start thinking like accountants and starting to think, what is the value of what I'm delivering to this client? And stop thinking, what is the cost of producing what I'm about to give to this client?
Yes, and do you I mean, it's difficult to tell where it will go, obviously, but do you think that for services such as document review, and for elements of what law firms are charging for, there might be kind of specific fixed costs, whereas for everything else, it's still kind of billable hours?
I suspect that is the way forward, David, and I suspect there will come to be seen, if not a market rate for an activity, then a range of rates within an activity. So if you are if you're using a magic circle firm to carry out your document review, you'll spend more on their bots than you will on a regional high street practices bots.
Yes. That's really interesting. All right, Nigel, this was a really interesting conversation. If people want to find you or have a chat, how can they do that?
By putting my name in their favourite search engine, and they'll find me easily enough. But yes, the website is www.haddonconsult.co.uk. I'm also on Twitter as at Haddon Consult. I'm also easily found on LinkedIn. Just put my name in there.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining.
You're very welcome, David.